So after making games in C++ for a couple of years that were, well, mediocre, I finally knocked some sense into myself and decided that if I want to make these big games I always dreamed of making, I just won't be able to do that completely on my own with just code. So I needed some help. That's why I decided to switch to Unreal Engine 5. So how will I go about doing this? Well, I am just too broke to buy a good course. So I decided to check out the official documentation. Alright, let's just see what... Oh... Damn. What is all of... What the... Let's just start with the basics. The interface, that can be the... what the... So even though I'm a developer and because of that I automatically hate myself, I don't hate myself enough to read all of that documentation. So, like any beginner of absolutely anything, I went to good old YouTube and searched for a tutorial. Eventually, I found a decent one and I started following it. The first step was to create a first-person project, because Unreal Engine has like these template projects that already have some basic functionality implemented in them. So when I created it and when I pressed play, I already had a fully functioning game. And of course, it's not pretty and it's also not fun, but like making something like this in C++ would have taken me weeks if not longer. So just pressing 2 buttons and getting this was absolutely amazing. It's like not even fair. In Unreal Engine you work with these things called blueprints. And they're like a visual version of programming. You got these like squares that are called nodes that all do something different. And you gotta connect them to each other with these lines, and you know, I got some mixed opinions about them, but I got the hang of them pretty quick. And after only 2 hours of Unreal Engine, I got this game to work. And like, you don't even understand how big that is. When I was learning OpenGL, you were lucky if you got a triangle rendered on the screen within 2 hours. And to create something like this from scratch, you would need at least a few months. So yeah, you can walk, you can shoot things, you can see these targets explode, win, lose, just like everything that you need from a game. But I mean, even I know this doesn't look pretty. I first need to learn about like environment creation, materials, lighting, all the fun stuff. So, like the good developer I am, I of course started learning more about programming, while absolutely not necessary. I made my first C++ script, learned some things about how Unreal Engine compiles their code, when to use C++ and when to use blueprints. Just some stuff I was interested in. So around this time one of my friends was having a party, and I was like, alright, I did some good work, I learned some stuff that I wanted to learn. I can just go for a few hours, go back home, get some good sleep, and then continue with my Unreal Engine process the next day. But you know, that's like not really what ended up happening. Because yeah, you know how it goes. Like, I met a girl and somehow we spent almost the entire night just talking.
What do you like? Alright, what? Alright, so like, alright, so like.
Which ended up with me getting sick for an entire week. So the next time I opened Unreal Engine was a full week later. And at that time I was just not in the mood of learning anything new or like doing anything complicated. So I just wanted to like build something. That's why I made a new project and decided to make a basic harvesting system. Why, you might ask? I have absolutely no idea, but it felt right at the time. I started off by creating a blueprint called harvestable object, because I wanted to make some kind of template blueprint that I could use to create multiple different objects out of like one blueprint. But like after creating the blueprint, I realized I had only 2 hours of experience in Unreal Engine and I have absolutely no clue how to do that. So back to YouTube I went and I started watching this video about data tables, which is exactly what I needed. But then they said I first had to watch a video about structs.
So even though I didn't want to learn anything new, I still had to take some time to learn a couple of things that I hadn't learned before.
And eventually, after watching a couple of videos, I got this blueprint to work where you could pass in a name and it went into the data table to find this name and then use the mesh that I assigned to that name in the data table. If you didn't understand anything I just said, don't worry, just know that I created an object that I can name something like tree or rock and it will automatically look like a tree or rock. So after that was done, I made it so that if you press the object, it would tell you which item would normally drop. So the proper way of doing this is something called raycasting, which means that when the player clicks, it will cast a line from the player's position to where the player is looking at. If this line then crosses with an object, that will mean that the player clicked on an object. But at this time, I really didn't want to learn about this in Unreal Engine. So the way I implemented this was definitely not pretty. But it worked, so I didn't really complain. And don't worry, you Unreal Engine nerds screaming at your desk right now. I will take my time to learn things the right way soon, but I just really wanted to make something and I didn't want to watch all of these videos about how to do raycasting. So after that I got these cheese blocks flying around when you press on the object. Then I make them fly around more pretty. I made it so the object has a max amount of uses before it disappears. And finally I made it so the player could pick the cheese blocks up. So we're gonna skip ahead a couple of months because school was getting in the way of stuff and I just needed some time. But once I started getting back into it all, I was like, why am I even making this harvesting project? Because that's not something I want to continue. I actually want to make a solar system simulation as a first project, and I know this is already way too complex, but you know, I'm probably just gonna dive into it anyway. So that's probably gonna be my next video. Luckily for that project I don't have to learn anything about environment creation, because it will just be some balls interacting with each other. But I do have to learn a bit about materials and textures, because I don't want them to be just grey, plain balls interacting with each other. So I went back to YouTube and started searching on a good video about materials. After a while I came across these legends who explained all the basics of materials very well. I first learned about the basic values of materials like the color, roughness and some other fun stuff. Then I learned about material instances, which are actually very useful. It's kind of similar to what I wanted to do with the harvestable objects. You have one master material and then a couple of child materials. If you change something in the master material, it will automatically change it as well in the child materials. But for each child material you can select a couple of values that you want to be specific to that child material. So if for example you choose it to be the color, then if you change the color in that child material, you'll only see it change in that specific child material. Then I started learning about textures and I would absolutely hate to be the one making these, but luckily there are a lot of sites where you can get them for free. Textures basically consist out of a couple of images that specify the values of the material. Like this for example is the metallic map of one of the textures, and all the parts that are completely black mean there's no metallic there, and the white spots mean that that's fully metallic. And there is a map for like every value of a material, so when you put them together you get something like this. I also learned how to use Quixel Bridge, which is like this big collection of materials that you can just like import directly into your project. Sadly it got closed down, but if you claimed all of the materials before it closed down, which I luckily did, you can still use them. So all I had to do was just click on one of the materials, download it, import it and apply it.
It does kind of look very ugly though, so I need to use styling to scale it down a bit. But now it looks very repetitive, so I learned this trick to use one of the materials in the starter content and then just literally duplicate it and change the texture, which actually came out pretty nice, and now it doesn't look repetitive anymore. So I know there's a lot more to materials than what I just covered, but I feel like this is a good start. Like I said before, I will probably be starting on a solar system simulation in the next video, but I hope you guys enjoy watching me take my first steps into the world of Unreal Engine. If you did, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like, and then I'll see you guys in the next video.